As some of you know, I was doing some videos on my RoboCop suit getting ready for Dallas Fan Expo, but that really didn't go as planned and kind of fell through due to weather, parking, Fan Expo's unorganization. So that is postponed until October. I'll be going to Big Texas Comic-Con in San Antonio. But now that that's aside, or the RoboCop suits aside for that matter, I'm dedicating all of my full time to this pack shell. I'm not going to let any more distractions get in the way. This is my full focus. I don't know if some of you have seen my community post, but I was given access, physical access, to an Anovos Spengler Legacy shell, which, as some of you don't know, is the superhero Sony lobby pack that some of us are familiar with on GB Fans, which means that the measurements on that pack shell are exact. There's no more mystery. I got to see everything. I got to get everything. And as excited as I was to have the screen use measurements on paper, they just don't translate the same. And because of that, I've had to pretty much redo everything. I know you guys are saying, well, that looks pretty much the same as what you've done in the past, but to be honest, it's completely different. A lot of these pieces had to be pretty much rebuilt. The boxes that I had were pretty close, but some of them were a little thinner. They weren't wide enough. They didn't have the right angles or contours, so all of that had to be adjusted. So I just wanted to share with you guys some of those things that I had to do. But like I said, every box has been adjusted or changed in some form or fashion. Some of the problematic parts was this crank gen. On the screen use packs, this crank gen is longer. The plans that I had, I was about 1/8 of an inch too short. So you have to understand, I'm trying to fit this within the hero shell outline. I have an outline of that shell. And if a measurement like that is off, even though it's just 1/8 of an inch, it throws everything else off. So then it won't fit right, or the pieces won't sit on one another right. So I had to cut this, extend it out. This tube is bigger than what most people use on their pack plans. I don't have the measurement offhand, but it is larger, and I didn't know that. I think I just used some 1-inch OD PVC or something. I can't even remember. It's not 1-inch PVC. It is larger than 1-inch PVC. They probably used a large wood dowel or something of the sort. But yeah, I had to extend this out. The ribs, that is the biggest thing. All of these ribs here are thicker than what we've come to know when it comes to pack plans, which is the general rule or measurement is 0.125 or 1/8 on all of the ribs. Most pack plans, that's what it is. I've always assumed it was 1/8 or 0.125. It's not 1/8. The thickness of the ribs is closer to 0.150. So I had to break off all of the ribs, which was a good thing because some of the rib placement I had was off compared to the screen use measurements. So doing that was a good thing. I had to do it. So I had to thicken these up to the correct thickness and then go ahead and get the proper placement on all of the ribs, which you probably can't tell, but they are perfect now. Not just close to perfect, they are perfect now. I just made some pilot holes for the nail marks, or the nails that I need to add in to reflect the nail marks that are on the screen use packs. I don't know if you can see it, but on the screen use pack there's a large taper right here that kind of is like crooked and runs like this. If you don't account for that taper there, the ribs won't sit right, or they won't look right. So I had to do that to get all of these to be just right and to perfectly reflect and match the screen use packs. But every measurement, I mean from here to here to here to here to here to here, I tried to match that perfectly. This rib is a little tricky too. Now most people wouldn't care, but this is my last Ural. This is the last shell I'm going to do, and I want this thing to be as close to the original as possible. And I've always been able to notice when looking at reference photos that this bottom rib, it looks like it sits kind of crooked. Like instead of flat, it looks like it just kind of sits at an angle. Well, come to know it after looking at the screen use pack or the Anovos Hero, it does. So I don't know if I can get it to come up here, but I kind of have it angled like that to reflect the original Hero. Now there's probably a lot of things that I'm going to explain here that some of you probably go, I don't really know what you're talking about. So you just kind of have to take my word for it. For instance, this line here, or this striation I added in, this is on the screen use pack, and that's just from them stacking the EDA top on this spacer box here. Now I didn't actually extend the box out, so I just created that, kind of sculpted in there with a file to reflect what's seen on the original Hero. Also here we have this little striation that's on the Hero pack. I sculpted in the rivets. I didn't actually put rivets this time. Sculpting it in is much easier. One detail I added in was this rib right there. Those two ribs have like this weird angle at the end of them. I'll try to pull up a reference photo to show you that. But yeah, I wanted to recreate that. These are just some of the pilot holes. There's not really a whole lot of texture on the screen use packs on the Power Cell as I originally thought years ago. So there's really not going to be a whole lot of texture that goes on this piece. But I am going to kind of get in here and do some Dremel work to kind of closer match the screen use pack. But even here, there's a little piece. I tried to reflect that, this little round edge, and then it sharpens out right there. The angle of the box I tried to recreate. This top part kind of sits like that. My thickness on my original Power Cell was off quite a bit, so I had to go in there and fix that. I added in the striations here on the spacer box that goes right above the Power Cell. I'm trying to see if my camera will adjust. As you can see there. My opinion of this is they used 3/4 inch plywood and stacked it on top of one another when they originally built this pack. It could have been pine wood. I'm not one of the ones that believes the original Heroes were made of foam. A lot of people think they were made of foam, but with the nail marks, with the ribs, I just don't think they would nail in ribs to foam. Was some of it foam? Possibly. I don't know. I don't think it was a mixture of foam and wood, but I'm going to say they went the cheaper route and probably did just wood. Maybe that's cheaper. I don't know. Maybe the foam was cheaper. But anyway, my opinion is it was built of wood, and this was 3/4 inch pine or plywood, and they stacked them all up top because the measurements all match perfectly on the screen use. It's 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch, 3/4 inch. So yeah, that's where those little lines or those striations come from. One of the most difficult pieces of this pack, I thought building the Cyclotron, which that's another story too. My Cyclotron matches the screen used hero perfectly, which was good news because building the Cyclotron is not the easiest part. To me, it's the hardest part. As of right now, the gun mount has been the most difficult piece. I've spent 2 days rebuilding this to get this to match the screen use hero perfectly, because there's so many weird angles going on. You have an angle here, an angle here. It angles in both sides here. The curvatures on all these are very strange on the hero pack. And you have angled ribs. It sits angled on the hero pack. And it's hard to accommodate every little measurement with that many angles. But I did it. It took me 2 days, hours upon hours upon hours trying to get it right. But I finally got it right, and it sits perfectly. All the measurements are right from here to here, from here to here. I know some of you are like, we don't care, but it is such a relief to be able to be done with it and move on. This corner piece was pretty much spot on. I was a little short, so no problem. You can add to it, and it's perfect now. Some of the heights on my boxes were a little short. Like I said, this was a lot shorter on my original. I had to widen it out, but it also, the height of it this way was a little short, and I had to extend it out. But yeah, guys, I'm rocking and rolling. I'll just kind of give you a tour, and you can kind of see some of the detail around it. For now, I'm going to come back in, hand sculpt some epoxy putty. It's going to be textured correctly. And that's the last thing I'm going to close with is my texture tests. This is another detail that's on the screen use pack. Is this sharp line here where it rounds out. I added that in also. Yeah, none of these boxes are attached at the moment, and that's just due to having to make so many adjustments. Once everything's attached, it makes it kind of difficult to do those adjustments. I'm going to do a once over on a lot of the measurements and just make sure before I attach, but that'll probably be the next thing I do. So texture, very, very important part of the pack shell. A lot of us have been using the drywall, the Homax spray texture, the water base specifically. And it's great. I am going to use some of it, but when it comes to the Cyclotron, at least on the top of the Cyclotron, it doesn't look like it was completely Homax texture. It looks a lot smoother and finer. So I was going through various tests trying to match the texture, since I was able to see the shell right offhand and see what I can get the closest. I was recommended Elmer's because I know some people believe that the packs were built of foam. As I've stated, I don't believe that. So they were saying that Elmer's glue was stippled to seal the foam. So I said, hey, why not? I'll give it a try. I tried Elmer's glue, and it does give a similar effect, but it's just not as close as it should be. So I don't have a sample piece of the Elmer's. It wasn't worth showing you a sample. I just didn't think it looked close enough. So another technique I tried was using drywall texture just out of a bucket, like here. and then stippling that on to a piece of styrene. And another fail, it wasn't even worth showing. It just wasn't even close. And then I tried epoxy resin. Epoxy resin was kind of close. I tried epoxy resin after I had tried fiberglass resin. Now my assumption is that the pack was built of wood, and therefore there was wood grain. And since the shells were built with fiberglass, I thought maybe they went across it like a gel coat, a little bit of resin to seal, or not, I shouldn't say seal, but to cover up a lot of that wood grain. I don't know if they would have went through that work back then. It's possible not. They could have just used texture too. I don't know. I really don't know. So we're just trying to get it as close as possible. So I tried fiberglass resin thinking maybe they would try to seal it with some fiberglass resin or cover up the wood grain. The fiberglass resin stippled. Stippling is a technique where you use a brush like this, whatever material you're using, and you just kind of dab it, brush it, and you're creating the texture with your brush. So that's what stippling is. If some of you don't know what stippling is. So I tried stippling the fiberglass resin, and the fiberglass resin, no kidding, was pretty much perfect. And this was just my first try. My first try on the texture looked, it was like perfect pretty much. I need to practice it a little more, get it down, but it looked perfect. I'll show you that last. So with that said, I went, you know what, fiberglass resin was pretty much perfect, but I don't like fiberglass fumes, and that's a lot of the pack to have to use the fiberglass resin on. So I said, I'm going to try epoxy resin and see how epoxy resin works, because that's less odor, it's not as dangerous, and I don't have to smell it. So I tried the epoxy resin, and it looks okay. It's close. It gave a similar effect that the fiberglass resin did, but it didn't really texture via the stippling the way that I would like. But it looks good. It was worth showing you a sample of. But the one that was pretty much perfect was stippling Bondo fiberglass resin. I don't know. I'm going to try to get that in the light. But as you can see there, it just came out perfect. And I wish I can show you a comparison, because I did compare it to the Screen Use Hero Cyclotron side by side, filling it with my finger, and this was just perfect. So yeah, that is how I will be creating the texture on a lot of the shell, with a combination of hand techniques, with epoxy putty I'm going to use. I'm going to use a little bit of drywall texture on some areas, because some of the areas do look like they were sprayed with drywall texture. And but mostly this is it right here. This is it. So I'm very happy to have the texture part down, because I was worried. I wanted to recreate it, and that's it. So if you guys are looking for it, fiberglass resin, stipple it on with a brush, and that is what you get. Beautiful, perfect. All right, guys, so we're going to be moving on. I'm very happy with what I have. To me, this is just exactly what I wanted when coming in and building this. I didn't want to build the same shell again. It had to be different. It had to be legendary. And to be honest, this is just so much better than my original shell. My original shell is so off now in comparison to the Screen Used. But we're here, we're moving it, we're getting on with it, and we're on to the next one. So thank you guys for watching.